This is Dirk Manning, the writer and creator of Nightmare World, Tales of Mystery, and Love Stories About Death, as well as that Right or Wrong column over at newsarama.com. And you are very fortunate right now because you are listening to GenreTainment.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to GenreTainment at sci-fi-pulse-radio.com. We're your hosts, Marx
and Julie, and today we chat with Victor R. Solis, the co-creator of the popular live-action comic book web series Generic Girl. This Jack Kirby-inspired series follows the adventures of closet comic geek Gillian Romero and her aspiring superhero roommate Pete Kirby, aka Captain Freelance, as they battle scheming villains, bureaucrats, and one mysterious machine.
Solis tells us how his International Academy of Web Television nominated series was created, provides behind-the-scenes stories, gives tips to web series creators, shares his views of the future of web series, and much more.
Now, what you just heard at the beginning of the show was a snippet from the theme song from our web series, Reality on Demand, a song composed and performed by our friend T. Sean Hardy. And you can find our web series at realityondemandseries.com.
Now, enough of our blabbing. Let's get to our interview with writer and producer Victor Solis.
Pete Kirby was a pathetic, ordinary young man until one day, struck by a bolt of radioactive lightning, his life changed forever as he became
Captain Freelance.
Quiet you, Gillian Romero's humble origin story began with a clandestine rendezvous outside Sheboygan.
Gross! You did not just imply that my parents conceived me in a roach motel.
Yes, I did. Generic Girl, fighting the powers of law and order the American way.
This is Marx, and you're listening to GenreTainment. I'm here today with one of the creators of the web series Generic Girl. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Marx, for having me on. This is Victor Solis. I'm one of the two co-creators of the live-action comic, as we call it, Generic Girl. My producing partner is Steven Wasserman. I've been working with him for many years, probably dating back to the 4th grade when we were tossing ideas back and forth about science fiction and other nonsense. So I've known him for a couple decades now.
For those listeners who haven't seen Generic Girl yet, could you please explain what it's about?
Yep, it is a comic book world come to life. We follow a closet comic book geek girl, Gillian, and her adventures with her roommate, the aspiring superhero Pete Kirby, aka Captain Freelance, as they battle villains, mayhem, bureaucrats, labor unions, and one mysterious machine with a god complex.
Now, I thought it was interesting, like the whole Captain Freelance element and him having money issues. I think a lot of filmmakers, when they start out, could relate, or creative people. What was the thing that kind of sparked that storyline?
Yeah, we have definitely retold our story, which is a bit tongue-in-cheek about how Steven and I were painting the inside of his house, and it was a pretty laborious project, and, well, the two of us just started dishing ideas back and forth, but really, we had been thinking at the end of 2010, well, what are we going to work on next? We have already been training ourselves, essentially, as most filmmakers do, through shooting music videos, spec commercials, then moving into commercials for clients and doing short films. That's all been, in our past, and we thought, well, let's talk about doing something entertaining for a wider audience. We were not yet at the level where we were ready to start engaging with investors and possible financiers for a feature. I think a lot of other independent series creators find themselves in those positions as well. So in a way, it was by design that we said, how can we create something that we're going to enjoy? We truly hope that other people will enjoy it and have fun and make something that's going to engage. And rather than doing a one-off, which would be like a short film, why not create a series following these characters in a world that we have loved for quite a while, in the world of comics, the tropes and conventions and silliness that you see in the old Silver Age comics, dating back to the Jack Kirby and Stan Lee days, and some of the things that were silly about the TV shows that were adapted from comics, going back to, say, the Adam West Batman, the Lou Ferrigno Incredible Hulk, the Bionic Man, the $6 Million Man, Lee Majors, in the later 70s and 80s. So that's the impetus for Generic Girl, and obviously it was a loving send-up of all those silly conventions and tropes. So we wanted to work with a heroine who traditionally would be more the love interest, the girl next door, the Mary Jane to Peter Parker's Spider-Man. We thought, well, why not make her the heroine and the lead of the story?
And she doesn't have any powers really either, which is an interesting twist.
That in this world of heroes and villains, if anything, her power is that of common sense. Whereas everybody else in this wacky world seems to jump into action first. And we essentially created the origin story with Gillian in season 1. We have not yet seen that she must rise to fight in a way that she can through perhaps logic, rationale, subterfuge, and her own reasoning skills, as opposed to death rays and heat vision or anything like that. So she's the most grounded human character in that crazy world.
And when you decided to make it a web series, were you very familiar at the time about the different web series that existed at the time, or were you kind of new to that world?
That's a good question. This is definitely the first series that we've done. We immediately, when we started considering the medium, started to do our research. Like, well, what else is out there? We had not yet been a part of the community. We certainly knew other filmmakers. Steven was wrapping up his studies at USC's School of Cinematic Arts in the master's program. We had definitely worked on a lot of projects in various capacities, but we didn't know the community yet. And from the get-go, I started discovering series like David Nett's Gold, Night of the Zombie King, Mark Gardner's Cell. And this was, late 2010. Doesn't seem that long ago, but in terms of how fast new media has moved and how fast the web series medium has evolved, it does feel like a while back. And it's been amazing to see how well the community has rallied around one another. And what we've really enjoyed is discovering the cooperative camaraderie of this group. It really benefits from the hand holding, the shepherding of fellow creators' projects through all the way to completion, and discovering that ultimately we want to help each other out, work our way up the ladder. It isn't competition. Really, we're all competing with any other form of entertainment that a viewer could be watching. We're not competing amongst ourselves as series. I've never looked at it that way. We would rather collaborate and see how we can all grow, because a lot of us are basically at the launching stage of our careers. There are some that have moved from the TV and film industries into the autonomy and the freedom of the series community. But in the same way, they're also trying to negotiate these waters and figure out what is the model that works, all the way from development through production through promotion.
Before I forget, congratulations on winning Best Web Series or Music.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. We were really happy to share that with our composer, Daniel James Chan. We have to give him the rightful shout out. Yeah, that was from the unofficial Google Plus Film Festival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Who put that on, that film festival?
It was a really amazing process through just the efforts of a couple of people, Adam Cohen and Jamie Bird. They are both veteran filmmakers. And we give them a lot of credit for getting so many people to rally behind this evolutionary step in film festivals, which is a bit of a hybrid process. It was one part online, which is probably 90% of it, and then 10% offline in the real world by having these red carpet events and screenings in both Asheville, North Carolina, and Los Angeles. So we were able to see a lot of the other filmmakers here in Los Angeles, meet them, and do some interviews on the red carpet. But the screenings of the short films and the series were actually online using Google Plus as their main interface. So it was really amazing to see a global audience and global submissions to this festival. It's in its second year, so it's a very exciting new step for film festivals, and perhaps there are other festivals that will be taking this route.
Yeah, it was a unique approach. Hopefully we'll get another one next year. I really like the cleverness of sticking to just a few locations, because that can be really burdensome on a web series creator financially and time-wise. Was it difficult writing for such few locations, and were those sets or actual locations?
Yeah, a couple of very, very valid points in there, especially for as we talk to other series creators. The first question is a quick one as far as what was the nature of the locations. If people even just watch the first episode, within the first 20 seconds when we do the recap. And it's odd to do a recap in the first episode, which is why we called it Previously Not on Generic Girl. Give snippets of all the things that are to come in the show. And we have very few exterior locations. The majority of it was all interior. And we decided to go with some office spaces that Steven Wasserman had access to in his father's law office building. So there were a couple of suites that were available. So we looked at paint colors. We grabbed some paint, painted some walls, and basically made those offices into standing sets, as it were, without having to actually do a build, which definitely would have costed much more. So that's the first question about, were they sets? We created those spaces, the villain's lair of the evil doctor, the apartment of Gillian and Pete, and then the offices of the labor unions, the Local 666, Henchmen's Union, and the Heroes Guild of America. Now, as far as planning from a pre-production standpoint, I had a similar conversation with the gentleman of 8 and 5 recently when we interviewed them via Hangout. And obviously their show uses a green screen tremendously to great effect. And that was a wise decision from a pre-production and from a financial standpoint because they decided to spend a lot of time in post. Now for ourselves, since we did want to keep the budget very manageable, we thought, number one, what do we have access to? Well, great. We have these offices. Now, how can we maximize that into our sets? So you're right. That definitely informs the writing. And I would advise anybody to first think, instead of, I'm in the writing stage, I'd like to have a car chase, I'm going to blow up a building, we're going to jump over rooftops. Instead, okay, what do I have access to? What are our existing resources? What can we do as inexpensively as possible, and let that inform the script as opposed to vice versa?
I'm a filmmaker also and work in web series, so I always like to ask the techie question about what equipment was used. What type of cameras did you use to film?
Right. At that time, we were definitely at DSLRs. Steven, through his production company, already owned the 60D. We found that really was the most bang for the buck, as opposed to jumping up to the extra bells and whistles of something like the Canon 5D. So the 60D was our workhorse. Our director of photography, Jack Alexander, also owns a 60D with his own glass. And the more interesting decision that we made in terms of the equipment there were the optics. When we did our reference work and looked at the older shows and thought about the aesthetic of the 1960s and 70s in terms of sitcoms and those shows I'd mentioned, like the original Amazing Spider-Man or the Batman with Adam West and Cesar Romero, we thought, how could we achieve more of a softer look that was consistent with the saturation of colors that you would see in older comics. In comics back then, it wasn't glossy. It was pulpy, almost newsprint that these things were on.
Mhm.
So we chose to go with a variety of Steinel vintage German lenses. Some of them date actually back to the 1950s. So they were all prime still photography lenses. And they do give a little bit of breathing. The image size moves slightly when you rack focus, with the exception of a couple of times that we use zooms that were much more modern lenses from maybe like the early 2000s. We chose to go with primes and have those vintage primes to give us an older look to go with the aesthetic of the piece. So that's what we chose as far as the camera goes.
And how did you do the sound?
Yeah, sound was using our old workhorse H4n Zoom, the Zoom recorder. I think a lot of filmmakers have embraced that. And definitely for series production, what we've advised when we've talked to other aspiring filmmakers, whether it be scripted narrative like Generic Girl, or your documentary, you're doing even something like a vlog where you're primarily in one room, is to definitely use non-sync sound, to definitely go with an external sound recorder. That we've always adopted from filmmaking at the higher levels, where you have your separate sound mixer and your boom operator. So yeah, we did have our boom operator using a shotgun mic and recording straight into the Zoom. So we slated every shot and used the on-camera mic very, very few times. We do it a little bit more often when we have smaller shoots and shoots for clients. But that's just to help with the syncing of the on-camera mic sound and then the external Zoom microphone. So the Zoom was our main workhorse piece of equipment for sound.
And you guys have interesting and colorful costumes and props. Who did that work?
Yeah, we owe a big debt of gratitude to Steven's wife, Laura Wasserman. She's definitely not a costume designer by trade, but she's always loved helping with the more the crafts that have to do with the hands-on painting, the production design, the choice of blouse for Gillian, and how are we going to come up with, say, the character of Hildy, her outfit. That was definitely something that Steven and I began with the conceptual sketches, working with our conceptual artist and the artist who also drew all of the comic style animated intro, where you see Pete, the pathetic young man on a park bench, and Gillian's story. That was Peter Jin, who is an artist and a filmmaker. So we first worked with him to get the conceptual sketches down and the color palette for each one of the characters. Obviously, a lot of purples and reds with the villains. And then with the heroes, we wanted something brighter. So Gillian goes from a pink and then into an orange top. Pete always has his Hawaiian shirt. He's just flown in from Guam. And he has his cargo shorts, and his uniform or superhero costume is kind of underneath all of that, all of his civilian wear. So Laura was fantastic, and she brought in a couple of her friends as well to help with the final tailoring, and some of the stuff was off the rack, and others, like Hildy's costume, was a bit more built up from different materials. So they were very, very helpful.
And you have a great cast to bring the characters alive. How'd you find your lead actors?
Yeah, that was through a fairly traditional method of casting. Fortunately, since we're here in Los Angeles, we're based in Torrance, just south of LAX. So since we have the benefit of the big circles of actors here, we actually chose to do a SAG New Media contract before SAG and AFTRA had merged. So we wanted to make sure that we had as wide a pool of actors to draw from. So we definitely have always encouraged series creators to go through casting and make the time to go through several rounds. We used LA Casting and nowcasting.com, those particular websites, and put out the general casting call. So we went through that first phase of tremendous numbers of headshots and resumes, and we were looking for the girl next door that was accessible to the audience. We started bringing in the actors, and several of the actors, we really loved their improv and their skills, and so brought them in again to read for some of the other parts, such as Hildy, as well as the women who appear in the Local 666 and the Heroes Guild of America. So even though we didn't initially cast for all of those female characters, we found that these actresses really had the skills and the shtick that we were looking for. So with Alexandra Olsen, she came in probably towards the last round of that first phase. We really enjoyed her energy and what she was bringing to the role. We've never painted ourselves into the corner of this is the character, this is how we see her, or this is how we see Pete, and we've got to find somebody that fits that. Instead, we've found it more effective to go with the open approach of let's see what they're bringing in, and let's see what unique twist they're presenting to the character. So Alexandra was called in a second time to delve a little bit more into the character. We always had them read some of the lines from the script or from the sides. And then we also did a lot of improv to get a feel for what else could they stretch to do with these scenarios between Gillian and Pete, for example, or between Gillian and Hildy, since it's a very different dynamic when this crazy villainess stumbles into the hero's apartment. So Alexandra came back a total of 3 times to test out the chemistry between her and Matthew Borer, who we eventually cast in the role of Pete. So you have to make the time to really run the actors through the paces and really make sure that the chemistry between the leads is going to work for the piece.
Now, you did improv during the audition process. Was there any improv during actual filming?
There was definitely improv with a few of the characters, not so much with the heroes. Occasionally with Matthew Borer as Pete. He's got a great background through Upright Citizens Brigade and Groundlings. So there were certain lines where we gave him creative license, but definitely with Johnny Skortis, who plays Hank the Henchman. He's a stand-up comic here in Los Angeles, and we would always do, maybe 1 or 2 takes on the book, and then that last take was one for Johnny. And a lot of times it made its way in terms of his improv into the actual final episode, as in the episode, I believe it's episode 2, Requiem for a Henchman, when he's dispatched to his doom, and he just rambles and rambles about wanting to see a sequel to The Crow. That was all Johnny. And he's just got a crazy knack for creating these characters and these voices. And so we knew that we wanted to also bring him back, not just for the first henchman, but Frank the Henchman, Frank Sr. the Henchman. So whenever you see a henchman, with the exception of Mo Marcellus Robbins, who plays the enormous tank, he's a linebacker of a man. Johnny plays a lot of the different henchmen, and he really came up with a lot of the shtick and their voices and the lines himself. So it was awesome to have somebody who was bringing that improv skill set to the game.
Great. Yeah, I remember the Crow sequence was very funny, and whenever he was up at the door dropping off the package, I don't know if that was improv or not, but it felt like it could have been partially improv.
It finally was for episode 1. We had always had certain lines scripted in the mindset of let's see what Johnny can do with this. So for example, we had written I just need to get your John Hancock right here, and then he started running with the whole Hancock gag. So if you give a talented improv comedian enough fuel, they'll take that and make a fire out of it. So a lot of the nuance and the bits were definitely owed to Johnny.
Now, especially with it being a comedy, I'd imagine there was a few goofs or funny moments on set. Is there anything you can think of to share with us?
Well, I Glad that you brought that up. When we were talking about, going back to the format of the medium itself, that web series is not just I'll post up my 6 episodes or however many, and we're done, and we'll see what happens. We said, we've got the not so much the bloopers, but we have these outtakes that are not going to make it in, like say with the ladies of Winkies, the gentlemen's club in Guam, where the Deus Ex Machina is hanging out when he should be trying to save Gillian, and you have these ladies in a strip club. So they had a whole lot of improv as well. We knew we weren't going to be able to use it all, so we said, well, the great thing about syndicating your videos, your episodes online, is that you can do it on a regular basis. So we actually are sitting on a library of different outtakes and bits that we have shot, and one of them is the Henchman 101 series, as it were. We've posted one of those on YouTube, but we have several of them with Johnny just rambling and ranting in his different henchman characters that we're posting up every Wednesday. So we've actually decided to make that into just more supplemental content. So if people will be watching, they'll start to catch up with those over the next few weeks.
Now, there's going to be a season 2, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how you plan, like when and how you're going to launch that?
Yeah, we have fortunately connected with some great people out of New York City. They are slowly building up this network that's going to be launched in 2013. It's going to be by comic fans for comic fans. It's a network of comic reviewers, professional comic artists, web series creators, of course, like ourselves with Generic Girl, and we were continuing to reach out to other series who are embracing the worlds of film with comics. So through their connections and through their fantastic support of our show, we're looking forward to developing season 2 and launching that probably the middle or towards the end of 2013. So we're going forward with the plan of having a total of 3 seasons. Season 1, the origin story, the world building of this comic book universe that the characters inhabit. Season 2, we want to introduce, of course, a few new characters, but really start to run with Gillian as a very active hero. She has to take the call. She has to rise into action. She's got to battle people that she never thought she would. And since her background is that of someone who has turned down her own love of comics and her love as a creator, in episode 1, she says, "Oh, I better sell my issues of Amazing Girl." And Pete says, "That was your best work." She has suppressed her love of creating to go into pre-law and to be a philosophy major. And that's not really her true life. That's not really what she wants to do. And, we've definitely channeled that from people we know and ourselves. Like, you have to believe in filmmaking as your calling. You have to believe in the creative process. You have to, as Mark Gant has said recently, create that door of your own and walk through it. Don't wait for somebody else to open up that door for you. So we want Gillian really come into her own and realize that she is a hero herself, and she has her own mission and her own skills and powers that she can bring to the fore. So that's a little bit what we're using to fuel season 2.
You're very active in the web series community now. I'm curious what you think the future of web series, especially for independent web series creators, might look like.
Yeah, we've recently had this conversation. In fact, I think we have this conversation with almost every filmmaker. Whether they come from, as I said before, film and TV, the traditional industries, and are trying to seek the autonomy and the independence of the series format and the ability to engage their own audiences. And then speaking with aspiring filmmakers, one of the first initiatives that Steven and I did to reach out to other filmmakers is through creatorup.com. They have brought together different series creators to create this series of courses. They're all video courses about series filmmaking, production, and promotion. So, for example, Mark Gant discusses his background with the Bannon Way and how to pitch and develop a series. Stephen and I talk about pre-production and again, making the most of all your resources. So it's been fantastic seeing that other series filmmakers are coming together to help the next generation. And that's what we're looking at. There's a lot of kids out there, and I say kids, but this goes all the way from high school up through the 20-somethings that really want to tell their own stories. But it feels like a daunting process to a lot of them, as we've spoken to them. So instead, we want to make this more approachable, that you're teaching yourself the skills that you need, and you're learning what it takes to sustain a story. So those younger filmmakers, they're really looking at online and the new media space as not just a launch pad to try to get into some higher level of the filmmaking industry. They're looking at new media and online as the destination. This is the place. Online is where you're going to be able to create your story, to slowly build your audience, your following, and be able to directly distribute your content right to the fans. We've seen this model happen with music through the era of Napster and MySpace, and going from a very traditional top-down model with the record labels to now you make your music and you get it right out there to the fans. So we're very, very close to that tipping point in a way now, with the proliferation of different distribution models that are out there. We first launched with JTS.TV. JTS means just a story. And they are going with a subscription model. And now more platforms are starting to adopt that model. You have sites like Distribber with 2 Bs. There's Distrify. Chill has just launched their new Chill Direct, where the fans, the viewers, will be able to pay directly. So now that's the big question, as TubeFilter recently posed in their event here in Los Angeles, is pay to play. Are the audience members willing to pay? People pay for Netflix, people pay for Hulu Plus. So I think that now the marketplace is really rich with a new supply of distribution options. And it's to the benefit of the creators that they will now be able to figure out, well, what's the model that's going to work best for me to reach an audience? Of course, you've got to have a fantastic product. So as we've said, go back to the script, spend more time in your drafts. If you think it's good, get some people to help you as your story midwives, as we call them, to get your project through. Really get good constructive criticism. So I think that the series format is definitely here to stay. As humans, we always tell stories. It's what we do as people. Very rarely does a storyteller just give you one episode and that's the end. The bard would tell many acts. The bard in medieval times would tell of one tale of a king, and then on to the next king's story, and the prince and the princess. So there's always this chain, and here we are, 2012, 2013, there is a chain that you can tell with your characters, and also know when the story is over. Like we've said, okay, we're going to go with probably 3 seasons. There are other characters and there are other genres that we want to jump into. So for the aspiring series creators, really make sure that you love your story and that you love your characters, because you're going to have to live with it for a long time.
Yeah, it's not like a film where you just do it once, then you're done and you move on to next film.
Right. And for those of us who are still interested in features, I mean, we're definitely developing features. It's a very different animal. It's a very different medium. So certain stories certainly are better told in the feature medium. It's a contained tale, and you're going for perhaps 80 to 100 plus minutes. But for the series, for example, interviewing 8 and 5, they went for 16 episodes. It's over 2 hours of content. We wrote 8 episodes initially. We wanted to keep our page count down in terms of production, so we could manage all of the days of production and, of course, the days of post-production. But we inevitably expanded out and said, this tale is better told in 10 episodes. And some people have done, say, 3 episodes. with the goal of trying to gain more interest and garner some more financial backing to make the rest of the show. And that's a different model. We decided let's make something that is contained that we can offer to the audience and slowly get them behind it. And if they love it, then great. We have a following and we can tap that following for the future when we say, hey, guys, we're getting ready for what's next. What's next is season 2. Are you behind us? And slowly get to a point where if the audience is willing to give that $1, $5, whatever the amount may be, whether it's through a PayPal donation, it's through a crowdfunding campaign, selling your merchandise, whatever you can do to now sustain yourself as a filmmaker. But it begins with that great story and building the following behind it.
Monetizing a series seems like it's the big hurdle. And we talked about the pay model. So do you think that's going to be the future option, or what about ads, on those kind of options?
Yeah, when we've talked to other folks about this, we've looked back at other models, and something I think you learn in business classes, and when you look at this more of a business standpoint, because it is show business, is what are some other case studies out there? Like I mentioned, the music industry, definitely the record labels really tanked, and rightfully so. The studios are approaching this new online model with a lot of trepidation, and they are moving very, very slowly. Of course, they're huge corporate entities, and they must move slowly. So we've looked at other case studies like, say, the newspaper industry. What has happened to Time and Newsweek? They cannot sustain the production costs of making a paper-based form of news. They are no longer going to be making a magazine. But Time has just launched their new site, which is primarily video. You've seen the rise of Huffington Post with their video, and now they're doing live broadcasting. And even dating further back, for people who know the cinematic history of coming out of vaudeville, is there's talent. There's talent out there. Now the parallel is YouTube. The YouTube is a new vaudeville. Some people love to do one type of comedy. Other people love to comment about the goings-on in the news. So vaudeville eventually moved into film. They needed talent. They tapped into those comedians and acrobats, the almost circus and sideshow performers, who some of them made a fantastic transition. They moved into talkies, those who had the voices and that could create these characters on film with sound. So now, for the YouTube generation, we're looking at appealing directly to the fans, but how do we do this, and how can we sustain ourselves? Personally, I feel that based on the history of YouTube over the past few years, that the ad revenue has dropped tremendously. We've seen that in articles like the Chicago Tribune interviewing Driving Sports and their founder, who I believe, if I'm quoting correctly, the revenue from the ads on YouTube had dropped for him about 90%, which is tremendous. That would be a tremendous drop for any business. So how can this business of a film producer, a filmmaker who produces a product, you are producing a piece of entertainment or perhaps documentary, something that moves an audience. Now, how can you get that product out to the marketplace and sell it for a profit? So YouTube and the ad revenue model is definitely changing. Now with the so-called channelization of YouTube, we're seeing that no longer is it easy for one person to start doing vlogs or doing their very low-cost episodes, posting those and trying to get ad revenue. The CPM rates, the cost for every 1,000 views, is extremely low. Now what you must do is be part of a network. So we've seen the rise of Full Screen, a Big Frame, Machinima, Nerdist, these enormous networks of channels. You need to be able to make content, number one, that's really appealing, so that number two, you can appeal to a bigger network, a bigger entity that says, hey, you have something that an audience is willing to watch. And then step three, network with that larger group, like in our case for this new comic-centric network, will be able to benefit from this entire shared audience. So now if you're, say, a comic reviewer, and every week Wednesday, you get your comic pull, you talk to people on YouTube about it, you shoot your short little videos. There's a lot of great young people who are doing that. Now, that's fine that they're talking about comics, but they need to become a part of a network of comic reviewers. So I think that's the new paradigm on YouTube. I'm specifically talking about YouTube as a platform because it's the biggest of them all. It's where the audience is. The second place and third place video platforms are far, far behind. So if you're on that platform, you need to be a part of a larger group so you can cross promote and say, hey, if you really love Spider-Man, this is what I do. Now, if you want to watch Green Lantern, go check out his channel. If you want to look at cosplay, go look at this girl's channel. So you want to find that niche market of like-minded people that are interested in your, say, geek culture, whether it's, video games or it's role-playing games, or maybe the people who love horror, and band together with them. You can make your own network. You don't have to wait for that phone call from the collective, management company or Big Frame or Full Screen. You can make it yourself, and if you show that you have the subscribers, you demonstrate that you have an audience, now you're in a much better position to be asking for the direct payment from fans. And so that's one model to look at if you're going to be on YouTube. It's not about the ad revenue. It's about building up the audience and then being creative about selling merchandise or, selling the DVDs, the Blu-rays, what have you. Because now you have an audience that's eager and they're willing to listen to you.
That's good advice. Speaking of advice, now that you've done season 1 of Generic Girl and you're very involved in the web series community now, I was wondering if you could give us like a big do and don't for web series creators, or perhaps I should say filmmakers wanting to become web series creators.
Yeah. The do's and the don'ts. Well, the big do, and this applies to all aspects of filmmaking, but definitely if you're proffering your content online, is this is all social. These are social platforms. Marx, what you're doing is social outreach. You're expanding to other creators and sharing with other aspiring creators. All of these platforms are social, and that's the number one word, is you have to know that you're making the time, not just for production, which to us, it's almost becoming like, say, 30, 20% of our effort. 70, 80% plus of your effort is on the outreach. It's on whatever you want to call it, audience development, marketing, promoting. It's all the same thing. It's reaching out to new people. You have to find your platform of choice. Some people really love Google Plus. Some people really love Twitter. Others have tremendous followings on Tumblr. If you look at some amazing shows like The Misadventures of Awkward Black, or just search for Awkward Black Girl. Issa Rae, the creator, is now in a TV deal with a network for launching her own show. She started with 1 subscriber back in the day, so the Guild started with 1 subscriber back in the day. Don't seek to emulate those top shows. Go with your own vision. If it's something that you really love, like you want to talk about biology and snails and crustaceans, like, hey, pick your interest and run with it. If you're passionate about it, that passion is going to come through on screen. So number one, have that great passion, and number two, it's got to be social. So you post your video, share it with others, ask them for comments. If you're on YouTube, get the creator playbook and look at it religiously, because those are the set of best practices that work on YouTube. The thumbnail, is it catchy? Is your title catchy? Are you following the best practices? If you look at our channel, definitely, feel free to use it as a model. We don't have Generic Girl as our first 2 words in our title because that's frankly the most generic possible title. It doesn't work. Instead, use keywords and key phrases. So you have to learn what works out there and be social. You have to share with others, ask them for advice, ask them to comment, and compliment other like-minded shows so that you're starting to build your own network. And then you have an eager group of people who are really going to go to bat for you when you say, hey, I'm doing a Kickstarter campaign, or hey, my t-shirt is out, consider buying. People will help you if you're genuine, if you're honest, and if you share socially.
May I ask what is the first two words on the website?
First two words for our website, it's gogenericgirl.com for us. And if you find us on YouTube, it's Generic Girl Series. And on Twitter, we are at GoGenericGirl. So we check them all. We always reply. So we're always eager to talk with new people.
Is there a don't you would suggest? Something that you commonly see as a mistake?
We this from people in publicity, in PR, public relations, is in polite company, you talk to other people and you ask them questions. And you should probably adopt that towards being out in the world of the online series and new media is don't talk about yourself. Don't talk about yourself all the time. So that seems counterproductive. It's really 90% of the time, the majority of the time, you're asking other people about what they're doing. Hey, I read your webcomic. It made me laugh. Hey, I watched your horror short film. That was crazy. I loved your effects. Hey, I watched your documentary about boxing, and that really moved me. Get engaged with the other people first. Compliment them. Ask them, how did they do it? You're always going to learn something. And then at the end of that conversation, the 10% is you talk about yourself. You mention, oh, by the way, hey, if you like comics, hey, if you love the old Adam West Batman, check out our show. Please subscribe. We're putting out new videos. So step one is talk to the other people. Ask them questions. Don't talk about yourself first. Nobody wants to hear that guy at the party who's just me, me, me. You want to first get a conversation going. Don't just try to feed your content to everybody else right off the bat. It pays to be friendly.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Anything else you like to add? Any other projects you're working on? Anything else about Generic Girl?
Well, the first thing that people can tune in to see before season 2 and that launch comes out is, can't say too much right now, but we are putting together a much shorter series. It's going to involve the rising of the dead that will be marching upon our capital, Washington, D.C., and one great hero, actually one huge hero, must rise. So early 20th century, pulpy, weird tales kind of feel, and one amazing American hero is going to have to fight the walking undead. So we're going to be looking to develop that into January and February of 2013.
Hi, I'm indie actress Jen Page from Dorkness Rising, Geek Seekers, Chopstocky Boom, and more, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Thank you to Victor Solis for agreeing to the interview, and we wish him luck with Season 2 of Generic Girl.
So that's it for today's GenreTainment. Check back next week with all new guests from our favorite films, TV shows, novels, and web series.
And don't forget about the other great shows on this channel, like Ian Cullen's SFP Now, which typically airs on Fridays, and Jeff Trek on Saturdays.
Plus, we have a new show premiering very soon called The Round Table, where various hosts from the channel team up with a few special guests to discuss hot topics in our favorite genres.
And we will be right back here on this channel at sci-fi-postradio.com next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific.
And don't forget, you can also search the archives to hear any of our past episodes. Until next time.